Today, we're going to try to turn this into a drum set. A lot of people just basically set the drums up and then try to make themselves fit the drum kit. The better option is to fit that drum kit around you. Now, a lot of this I'm gonna go over is gonna seem ridiculously obvious to anybody who's been playing for a little while. I've been teaching for 30 years, and I've seen all kinds of crazy things when it comes to setting up a drum set, because again, if you're new to this, you just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. Step one is you want to just sit how you're comfortable. You don't want to be sitting, like this, because it's not going to be comfortable to try to play drums with your legs right in front of you like that. Just sit where you're comfortable, you're relaxed, you're balanced. Then what you want to do is you want to take the snare stand and just center it within your legs there. You want to have that base pretty wide. A lot of people will set up their snare stand with this really narrow base, and then as you're playing, that happens. So now we get our snare drum. By the way, your snare drum, it should not rattle like that. That is, actually that's the inside for the air vent, which is no longer there. So in the next video where we tune everything, we'll be getting that out of there. Okay, so we got our snare drum. Get our sticks. Front to back, side to side, that's in a pretty good spot, right up, hitting right in the center of that. Now, as far as the height and the angle of your snare drum, that's all, there's a lot of personal preference in drums. I mean, that's why this is so confusing. But as a general rule, I like my snare drum kind of like belly button height. Now, the way I like it is if I'm hitting, a backbeat, I either want to be hitting a rim shot or just over a rim shot. A lot of rock drummers want to hit rim shots for every backbeat, which is great if you're playing, arenas. If you're playing a smaller venue, a lot of times those rim shots are going to be a little much. A problem I see a lot with snare drums, how they're set up, is people have them way too low. Okay, let me actually do that for a second. So if it's set too low, I'll see people kind of develop this habit where that backbeat hand ends up really just laying on that left leg. And that's a real bad habit to get into. Because soon, if you get, in that position, as soon as you got to go to do a fill or move that left hand anywhere, you're having to do this, right? You're creating extra motion that shouldn't need to be there. So next thing I wanted to set up is the bass drum. Now, the three things you're going to use most on a drum kit: bass drum, snare drum, hi-hat. So let's set these up, make sure they're as comfortable as possible, and then we'll add everything else around that. All right, let's talk about the bass drum for a minute. Again, this is going to fall under the stupid obvious category. Make sure your bass drum is facing forward. These heads might be reversed. And what happens is that's going to put your tom mounts in a weird spot, and it's also going to put your spurs in a bad position. So the way to tell how your drum is set up is by putting these spurs out. Now, every drum manufacturer, every drum set is going to have a slightly different variation of these. But in general, what you're looking for is these spurs to come out at a forward angle. I can't tell you how many times I've gone in seeing students' kits and their spurs are set up like this, right? They're pointing backwards. And they're going, well, my drum always slides. Well, that's why. Okay, you want your spurs facing forward. So if they'll only go that direction, that's a pretty big clue that your drum is facing the wrong way. So get those facing forward. Most spurs will have some sort of length adjustment on here so that you can kind of raise the angle that this drum is. Again, that's going to be personal preference. I don't like it sitting on the rim. I've seen a lot of guys have it actually on the rim, but that's going to scrape your drum up. Not to mention if you have these old style tuning keys with the big T handles, you can't turn them if it's all the way on the ground like that. Now again, a lot of the new drums just have regular tension rods, so you actually use a drum key on them. But yes, yeah, if you got an older kit with these T handles, you want it up just enough to be able to turn those. Now again, we're not going to go into tuning in this video, but unless you're playing old school jazz, bebop, something like that, where you want a big open bass drum sound, you're going to want to put something in that bass drum. This bass drum has a piece of foam in it, you know, a towel, a pillow, blanket, anything just to keep that rim down. Modern bass drum sounds are pretty short, pretty thumpy, not a lot of actual tone and duration to them. But we'll get into that in the next video. So we have our bass drum set up the right direction. We got our spurs pointed in the right way. Now it's time to position this. At this point, you want to just get back into that comfortable seated position and just see where your feet are landing on either side of the snare drum. And that's where you want to put that bass drum pedal. Now, you'll notice I'm facing forward this way. That bass drum is not facing straight forward. It's a little off to the right. Now, the reason for that is if you try to play a bass drum and sit straight, right in line with it, you end up doing this, right? You end up torquing your upper body, and it gets to be a little uncomfortable. So the way I prefer to set up my drum kits is, again, if I'm facing forward, that bass drum is a little bit off to the right. So just so you can see, and so I have a little more room to work, I just moved the snare drum and the seat out of the way for a second. And now what we're going to do is put on our bass drum pedal. Now this is actually a double pedal, second part right there. Now this has the old school mechanism that clamps to the hoop right here. A lot of the new ones have a screw adjustment back here where you can actually get to it with the pedal board on. Makes it a lot easier. This one, just move that pedal board out of the way. Get that on the rim. Again, in the stupid obvious category, you want this pedal attached to the rim. I've seen countless times where people have not tightened that down. If you're new and you're not playing real heavy, I mean, you know, you can have this pedal loose like this and be trying to play, but what's going to happen is it's going to rock and move and not create a consistent stroke, which is going to obviously cause developmental issues as you try to work on that bass drum technique. So make sure that's actually on that rim. Get that footboard in there so it's secure, and you're good to go on that side. Now I'll attach the double pedal side. So now we got our bass drum, snare drum set up. Time for our hi-hat. All All right, now we got our hi-hat cymbals. The other thing you're gonna need is your hi-hat clutch. Let me talk about the hi-hat clutch for a second, because again, a lot of people get confused about how this works initially. So if we look at it, we have a few different parts. We have 2 screws on the top. We have a felt, got another felt, and a big nut for the bottom. Now, the idea with this, now if we smooth those out of the way, most hi-hats, what's gonna happen is that bottom nut will only go so far. Tighten down, and then it's gonna kind of lock against the bottom there. And what you can do with these top 2 is adjust how much float you have with this cymbal once it's in here. So let's put that felt back on, put our bottom nut back on. Okay, so you can see right now, there's all kinds of play in there. So what you want to do, you can put it on the stand here. Go ahead and tighten that down so it stays up, just up there for right now. Is adjust how much play you want. And again, that's totally personal preference. You know, you want to have a little movement. You don't want it super tight. A, it's going to sound stiff, and B, you're likely to crack your cymbal. And then what you do is take this top nut and actually bring it down and lock it against that first one. Okay, that's going to keep that from spinning loose and having your cymbals get loose as you're playing. I mean, it can happen occasionally anyway, but that's the idea to prevent that. Okay, so now we have it connected to our hi-hat stand. We have our clutch. Now we just want to adjust how far that opens. I've seen all kinds of videos where people are going, okay, to get your perfect distance, put your sticks in, and then do that. So the way I adjust my hi-hat is basically I just, you know, move my foot a couple times, feel where it's like, okay, that's where I want it to be when I have the hi-hat closed. Tighten it, lit up. All right, so if we look on the bottom here, is this little screw. Again, most hi-hats are gonna have some sort of adjustment here. So you can adjust, let me move this out of the way. So you can adjust the angle of this bottom cymbal. Now the reason for that is you don't necessarily want them to hit completely flush. If they hit completely flush, you're gonna get kind of an airlock. And you're almost gonna get no sound. It's gonna just be kind of a. So with that, you can adjust how much angle and how much, you know, sound you get as you close this with your foot. Now, as far as the height of your hi-hats, I like them in a position where I can comfortably play them either tip of the stick on top of the cymbal or shank of the stick on the edge. So actually right there, that seems a little tiny bit high to me. Bear in mind, I'm also setting this kit up for my students. Although I have students from 7 years old to 72 at the moment. Most of them are the more short variety, so I'm gonna keep things maybe a hair lower than I would normally for myself. All right, but that to me would be a pretty good height, right? As I'm playing, I'm able to get that shank on the edge comfortably, but I'm also able to get that tip. Now, as far as how far out that is, again, you want to get that as close as you can to where your feet would naturally be sitting. Right, so if I just sit comfortably, all right, my left foot actually wants to be almost kind of in the middle of these two pedals. I tend to do kind of what just naturally happened here is center my foot between the two pedals, so I'm only going an inch or so either way from that most comfortable position to get either pedal. Most beginner kits are gonna have 1 or 2 rack toms. We're gonna go with like a basic 5-piece setup here. So 2 rack toms, we're gonna have 1 floor tom. I say floor tom because this one's actually gonna be mounted off a stand because it actually has no legs. But let's look at a couple of different ways we can set these toms up. The standard way to set up your toms is off your bass drum, which is gonna put your toms kind of here and over here. Regardless of how you've set up so far, with your snare here, 2 toms on that bass drum, they're both gonna be kind of to the right of your snare. Personally, I like my main 2 toms kind of on either side of my snare drum. Since I have the opportunity to do this, and if you remember that big giant pile of hardware that was laying down there at the start, I actually have a stand I can use to mount these tom holders not on the bass drum. Here's what we're going to use for our tom stand. This is actually just an ancient part of a cymbal stand. That has a 3-way clamp on the top. Your drum set may or may not come with something like this. So if you have to use your drum, your bass drum mounts, that's perfectly fine. If you want to do a setup like this, a mount like this I think is 20 to 30, 40 bucks. This is all Pearl hardware on this kit. Actually, all my kits have Pearl hardware, so I can interchange stuff as I need it. They have stop blocks. So because we're actually changing how everything's set up, we're actually gonna just loosen those before we even start doing anything so that we're not fighting with those, and then we can tighten them down later. So that if we ever move stuff, it's easy to get it back. And also it helps just things be a little more stable, because that way you don't have to tighten down your drum on the arm quite as hard. This will help kind of hold it in position. This is where we might have to start moving some stuff here and there just to make room for everything we've already set up. So we're going to start with our first rack tom, in which case this is a 10 by 10, if I remember correctly. Put that over there. So as we can see now, we're hitting our hi-hat. Can't move this over too much more because our bass drum is in the way. So now we got to start making some decisions. How do we want to start positioning things? I'm going to start with moving that bass drum. I'm going to keep the pedal basically where it is. I'm just going to kind of angle it a little more, just to make a little more room for that stand down there. Okay, so here's where you're just going to have to do some playing around to see how everything is going to fit. Because the thing you'll notice with these drums, like I said, 10 by 10. That's a very deep drum by today's standards. This was a kit I built back in '83, I think. This is its third finish I've had on this. I'm actually getting ready to recover them again. I got samples sitting over there. But back in the days of huge power toms. So it does make it a little hard to get necessarily as low as I want, especially over the bass drum. Now another thing you want to be aware of with your toms is to make sure that they're right side up. Now you can see on this one it's pretty easy to figure it out because you got your bracket, your screws are on top of the bracket. But again, I've seen a ton of people with their drums set up like this, bracket upside down. See how the bracket's here, which makes this part now a lot higher than it was. And then people will go, I can't get my drums low enough to play. Problem solved. Now we got both drums on our stand here. And now we can start trying to get them into position for people as small as like 4 foot nothing. So that gets to be challenging with these deep drums. This is 10 by 10, this is 12 by 10. So there's a limit on how low I can bring these down, even with them on the stand away from the bass drum, because you only have so much clearance over that bass drum. So fortunately, I think that's about as low as I can go, because that 12 inch is almost hitting that bass drum. Ideally, I like my toms a little bit flatter, not flat, but I like them so that as I hit them, right, I kind of have almost the same position as I do on my snare, where that stick is just kind of missing a rim shot. So now we have those basically where we want them. Let's make sure everything's tight. Not going to move. Go ahead and tighten our stop locks. For anybody who doesn't know why this is called a floor tom, it's because normally these drums will have 3 legs that are attached to the shell, and it just sits on the floor on those 3 legs. Now, as you can see, this drum has no legs. It's got a standard tom mount on it. So what we're gonna have to do is mount this off a cymbal stand. So if we look at how this is currently set, this floor tom would be very high. Right, if I put that up there, that's gonna be way too high to play. So there's a couple options on how to lower this. I could bring this bracket down on the top part of this stand, but even then I'm only gonna get a couple of inches. And unfortunately, this clamp is not really big enough to fit on the bottom part of this stand, because its diameter's too wide. So we got to keep it on this top part. So I think what we're gonna do is flip this over. All right, sometimes you got to be kind of like MacGyver when you're setting up a drum set. All right, so let's put it in this way and see how that looks. All right, so for my floor tom, I generally like my floor tom pretty much the same height as my snare. Now I just want to check that everything is in a good playable position, right? As I go around from drum to drum, again, I want to be hitting pretty much middle of the head. Okay, that feels pretty good. Now again, the idea here is you don't want to be reaching for stuff, and you don't want to be having to bring those arms in to be able to hit things. You want to just be, you know, as natural a movement as possible. Again, ignore the tuning, that's next week. Now with the tripods, you're going to notice on both of these, I have a leg pointing straight under where that weight is going to be coming. A mistake I see a lot of people make is they'll say, have it set up like this, coming out toward the camera here. So when all the weight is out here, what happens is the cymbal stand can do this, right? It can tip over just from the weight, especially as you start playing. Always try to have a leg pointing into where the weight is going to be distributed. Now, you have all these tripod legs, right? Where you're fighting for space on top of each other. And again, in a small space like this, you're really struggling, which is why if you look at my primary kit, I have a rack now. Actually, the studio kit and my main live kit, I both put on racks. A, it makes it a lot faster to set up. B, it's a lot cleaner. But again, most beginning drummers are not going to have a rack. So this is the kind of stuff you're going to be dealing with. All right, so I think I want to see if I can get this here. Kind of inside the floor tom, but beside the bass drum. Okay, now, again, like I said, the ride cymbal was mounted off this stand. Was mounted off this floor tom stand. And because of the space issues, the only way it could really be mounted was kind of like really vertical right here. And that's a very hard position for a lot of people to play. So now what we're going to do is put this, and again, another advantage of moving these toms over here instead of being on the bass drum is we have a little more space for our ride cymbal. So now we can put that ride cymbal at what's going to be a really good angle. Okay, the one issue we might have is this falling under the stupid obvious to anybody who's played a while category. Just want to go over your cymbal stand here and a couple of things you really want to make sure that this has. First thing, you need some sort of giant washer to hold the cymbal on the stand. A lot of times those are going to go missing and you try to put the cymbal on and it's going to rest all the way down here, and we don't want that. So you got to have your cymbal washer. Then you want a felt. You never want your cymbals getting any metal on metal contact. Your cymbals are always going to be softer metal than what your stands are made out of. And if you have metal on metal contact, you're going to wear that cymbal hole out. And it's going to get what they call keyholed. And that eventually will lead to cracking of your cymbal. And cymbals are expensive. We don't want that to happen. So you're going to have a felt. Then you're going to have some sort of either rubber or nylon kind of bushing sleeve to go over your metal sleeve. Now this one, I don't know if you can see this, is broken. So we will be replacing that. Now, you can see, I don't know if you can see this, how that's all dented and how it looks keyholed, right? You can see how it's a little oblong. That's actually not from being on a cymbal stand without a sleeve. That's from British Airways throwing my cymbal case about 20 feet off the plane onto the tarmac. Put your felt on top. Again, some guys will go without the felt on top because they don't want to accidentally hit it if they're playing like their bell. If the cymbal starts rocking, you can still get some metal on metal contact there, so I prefer to have it on. So I want to get that place where it's not hitting anything as it would move. Now, like I said, I don't know if you can see it from that angle, that leg on that stand now is pointing a little bit that way, which means that can happen. Right, which we don't want to do. Okay. Sort of like here, comfortably play top and edge. I can play the body of the cymbal. Very comfortably reach the bell. Cymbal stands tend to come in a couple varieties. Either a straight stand, where it's literally just a straight pole up to your tilter where you mount your cymbal, or boom stands. Now, again, this is something I've seen a lot. People think they have a straight stand, and they're just complaining, I can't get my cymbals where I want them because of all the drums and whatnot. And they don't realize they actually have a boom stand. Again, not all cymbal stands do this. A lot of the newer ones now have the top where it actually will slide down into this section, so it can operate as a straight stand, but once you pull it up, now you have this tilter, and you can angle it however you need to do that. So always check all your gear. Make sure you know what you're working with. So here, again, we're gonna have the cymbal leg pointing in to the drums where that weight is gonna be going. So let's get our cymbal. Now again, just like the other cymbal, we're gonna have a washer of some sort. Now this one actually has a washer and the sleeve is one piece, which is kind of nice. And that one actually screws on there, so it's not going anywhere once it's on. Your felt, your cymbal on, other felt. And your wing nut on top. All right, most beginner kits, you're gonna have a limited number of cymbals, most likely. Your main three components of your basic kit are gonna be your bass drum, your snare, and your hi-hat. Generally, you're gonna have at least 2 toms, probably 3. Anything more than that is just bonus. And as far as other cymbals, the other thing you're really gonna want is just a ride cymbal for another surface to play ostinato patterns on, and at least 1 crash cymbal. 2 is great. More than that just gives you more choices, but at least 1. So now we got our crash cymbal. Now, if I have only 1 crash cymbal, get over here so you can see me, 1 crash cymbal, I'm probably gonna put it on this side of the kit, because that way as I'm doing drum fills, come down, it's right there to hit, and then I can get back to my hi-hat. But I'm actually gonna be putting 2 on here. So I like to have my cymbals set so as I hit them, I'm hitting kind of in a bit of a downward angle on the edge of that cymbal. I don't want them up high enough where I'm hitting on the edge. If you hit right on the edge, it's gonna give a very unpleasant sound. And B, it's gonna put a lot of stress and you'll end up cracking your cymbals. Again, you don't want them so high that you're reaching. Again, get to the point where you're playing out and you wanna do visual stuff. Okay, put some up, make it a show. But your practice kit, your learning kit, your technical kit, get them where it's comfortable. My general way of positioning is I kind of reach my arms out and just maybe like another inch, right? That's kind of where I want my cymbals. I don't want to be having to reach, because then I got to reach to play them. And again, if I want to choke, I don't want to be having to do that. All right, now we're going to get this other second cymbal set up. So we're actually going to make use of this floor tom stand, since it's got a spot for a cymbal arm, and in that pile of parts we actually had a cymbal arm that fits. Now as for positioning, I like all my cymbals pretty much the same height. Alright. Get to my ride. Reach my crash. That crash. That's a pretty good place to start.